So hello and welcome everyone to our virtual data science Learnathon. I see that there are still people joining, so let's give everyone one more minute before we start. But it's really nice to see that you are joining from so many different places in the world. And actually we did this data science Learnathon already in a non-virtual setup in a lot of different places in the world, for example, in Bangalore in India or in the US. And it's actually now nice that we can have you all together here in this virtual place and do this virtual data science Learnathon with you today together. Okay, so hello and welcome one more time, everyone, to this virtual data science Learnathon. My name is Katrin, and I'm one of the data scientists in the evangelism team here at NIME. And I'm really excited about this virtual data science Learnathon today. And I'm really looking forward to the hacking part with you, where we get to solve different challenges together. But first of all, what is a Learnathon? A Learnathon is kind of a mixture of an event where you can learn something, so similar to a workshop or a course, and a hackathon where you get to work on different challenges and to solve different challenges. And therefore also this event today is split in two different parts. We will start with the learning part, and as it is a data science Learnathon, we will introduce you during this learning part to the different steps which are involved in a data science project. And then after this learning part, where we will first give you an introduction to Nime Analytics Platform, which is the tool of choice for the hackathon later on, and the introduction to the different steps in the data science lifecycle. We will move on to the hackathon part, where we will split in different groups and where we will also try out together a new or another interactive platform, which is called Gettertown, where we can form different subgroups to work together on the different challenges. And while working on the challenges, don't worry if you get stuck, you are not on your own and I'm not on my own, because actually a lot of NIMers are here in this call with us today who are going to support me while helping me with the presentation, and who are also here to help you and to support you while you maybe make your first steps with Nime Analytics Platform later on in the hackathon part. And to get you prepared to use Nime Analytics Platform in the second part of this event, I will hand over now to my colleague Emilio, who is going to give us an introduction to Nime Analytics Platform, where he's going to tell us what Nime Analytics Platform is and how we can actually use it to build workflows. So, hello, Emilio.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this Learnathon. And now I'll do a little demo to show you the tool. So first of all, what is Nime Analytics Platform? Nime Analytics Platform is a tool for data analysis, manipulation, visualization, and reporting. It is open source, and it is based on a graphical interface that lets you perform visual programming. So you have no need of coding. It also comes with a lot of extensions that you can add to add more functionalities, such as if you want to deal with text or with images, or if you really miss coding, you can also use some of the integrations to add some Java snippets, Python code, or Keras for deep learning, and so on. But let's now move to the tool. Here, if you have installed Nime Analytics Platform, or if you will do it during the Learnathon, here it's what you will see. And in the middle, you can see the workflow editor. The workflow editor is the core of the tool, where you can actually can build workflow and interact with them and execute them. But what is a workflow? A workflow is just a set of building blocks, this colorful square here that we call nodes. Nodes are just nodes are part of the workflow that carry out one specific task. In this case, in the case of the workflow that I just opened here, in the first part, there are some nodes that read from Excel files, from a CSV file. Then we join those data together. We do some pre-processing. And then in the end, we train a decision tree model to predict the probability of customers to churn from the company. Notice that each node comes with some input port and output port, which has those little black arrow here. Those are the input port. When the data is provided to the node, then something happens inside. So the task of the node is carried out, and then the data are provided as output to the rest of the flow. But how can we build such a workflow? If you want to build a new workflow, we have to move to the Nime Explorer view here on the left side, and then right-click on Local, and then click the first option, New Nime Workflow. A new window will pop up, and here you can select the name for your workflow. I will just put Demo. And you can see that now in the workflow editor, you have an empty workflow. And also here in the Nime Explorer, you have a new workflow demo that appeared. The Nime Explorer lets you browse through the workflows that you have locally and even remotely, or some example workflow that you have access to. But how can we start populating this workflow? We have to look for nodes. And to look for node, we have to go to the node repository. Here in the node repository, you can find all the nodes that you have available for you to use, and they are grouped into categories. For example, there are nodes for input, output, for manipulation, for views, and so on. To look for a node, you also have a search bar where you can insert keywords. In this case, let's say that for our workflow, we want to read a CSV file. And let's look for a reader, for example. As you can see, we have different nodes available. Like if we want to read from an Excel file, from a generic file, and also from a CSV file. If we decide to use this node, all we have to do is to just drag it from the node repository and then drop it into the workflow editor. And as you can see, a new node will appear. A new CSV reader node will appear. Notice that under each node, there is a traffic light indicating the status of the node. In this case, the traffic light is red. This means that the node is not configured and it's not ready yet to be executed. If we want to configure a node, we have to right-click on it and then click the first entry, Configure. Now a configuration window will appear. And here you have different options according to the node. For example, the CSV reader node lets us select the file that we want to read. So you can click on Browse and then go through your local machine and then look for the file, and also other options. But there is actually a more clever way to read files that I want to show you. Let's close this. And then let's go again to the Nime Explorer. And where is it? Here in the basic. I have an adult.csv file. Let's say that I want to read the CSV file. All I have to do is just drag and drop it into the workflow. As you can see, a new CSV reader node appeared. And also I can see the configuration window here. And it is already configured to read that specific file. And also Nime tries to guess how to properly read that file. So it's already set the column delimiter and so on. Of course, it's just a guess. So sometimes you can, it's not 100% right. But in this case, here in the bottom, you can see a preview of the file that we are reading, and it looks nice. So we can click OK. Now you can notice that the CSV reader node changed its status. It is yellow, and it means that it's correctly configured and it's ready to be executed. How can we execute a node? We just have to right-click on it and then click the second entry, Execute. Note again that the traffic light changed and now it's green. It means that the node is correctly executed and it's ready, and we can inspect the output of this node. To inspect the output, we have to right-click again and then go to the last entry, File Table. In this case, this file table can change according to the node. So this name can change, but remember that to inspect the output of a node, you always have to go to the last entry. Let's now click on it. And we see our nice table that we've read from the file. In this case, we have read a table with 32,000 rows containing information about, containing demographic information about people. So we have the age, the education, the sex, or the income, and so on and so forth. In this example, I will show you how to create a pie chart to show how many people gain more or less than $50,000 per year. So we want to create this pie chart split by those two categories, so from the income categories. And then let's also say that we are only interested into female entries. So we want to get rid of all the other entries containing male in the sex categories. To do so, we need, of course, another node that lets us filter rows. Let's close this window and then let's look for this node in the node repository. I can write, for example, filter row, but I get no matches. This is because, so in the beginning, it's really hard to remember the exact name of nodes because there are so many, like more than 4,000 nodes. So you're not expected to remember all the nodes that you will be using. And since it's hard, I highly recommend you to click on this magnifier here in the node repository to enable the fuzzy search. In this way, when you type a keyword, you get more results according to not the exact, so it's not 100% corresponding to the keyboard, but it's somehow related. In this case, I typed here filter row, and I get row filter, which is the node that I want to use. Again, if I want to use this node, I have to drag and drop it and add it to the workflow. And then we have to provide the output of the CSV reader as an input to the row filter. To do that, we just have to connect the two nodes like that. Now the table that I showed you before, it's available here as an input to the row filter. Notice again that this node here is not configured because it's red, so we have to configure it. Again, right-click and then configure. Here the configuration window is a bit different because in this case we have to select the column that we want to test. In this case, we want to get rid of male, so we have to only select the females people. So let's select sex as column to test. We will include rows containing the pattern female. And let's click OK. Again, the status of the node is yellow, so it's ready to be, so this node is ready to be executed. So again, let's right click and then execute. And now we can inspect the output. Let's right click on the node and then the last entry. In this case, it's called filtered. And here in this window, you can see the output. Then, of course, this output is changed as before because we have only 10,000 rows. And in the sex column, we only have females. Okay, now as a next step, I want to get rid also of some columns because, for example, the education column is doubled, and also the sex column only contains females, so we don't need this information anymore. So I need a new node. Again, I could look for the node in the node repository, or also I can have a look at the workflow coach. Here you have some recommended node according to the statistic of usage. So for example, Nime tries to guess which node you want to use after the row filter. In this case, you could use a group by, a joiner, or a column filter node. If I want to know more about what a node is able to perform, I have to have a look at the description view here on the right. And here I can read a little documentation of the nodes, like, for example, this node allows columns to be filtered from the input table. That is exactly what we want to do. So let's use this node. And again, I have to drag and drop it, in this case from the workflow coach, and then connect it to the previous one. Now again, right click, and then we have to configure it. Because we want to select, in this case, we have to move the columns that we don't want, that we want to get rid of, to the left part of this configuration window. In this case, we want to remove, for example, education num, and also sex column. And let's click OK. Again, right click and then execute. And then if we right click again, we can inspect the output of this node. And now we see that those columns disappeared because we deleted them. As a final thing, I want to create the pie chart that I promised you in the beginning. And I want to show you also another way to look for nodes, which is the Nime Hub. If you go to the right part of Nime and then click here on the view Nime Hub, you are prompted with this search bar. Here you can look for nodes, workflows, and extensions also. Let's type pie chart. And then you have a lot of results. Let's filter only nodes because we know that it's a node. And let's say that we want to see what's going on here. We can again see the description of this node. It creates a pie chart, basically. And we want to use this node. To use that node, again, drag and drop. Let's select this icon here in the bottom and drop it into the workflow editor. And again, connect it to the previous one. Now let's proceed to the configuration of this node by right-click and then configure. And select the column that we want to plot into the pie donut chart. In this case is the income column, because we want to know how many people gain more or less than $50,000. Then the aggregation method, let's leave occurrence count and move to this other tab where we can select title to our visualization. In this case, let's say income share. Let's also select the label type as %, and then click OK. Now we can execute this node by right-click and then execute. And now we don't want to inspect the output of this node, but because it produces a visualization. And if we want to inspect the visualization produced by a node, we want to inspect the interactive view, which is basically the interactive view is basically a browser window where we can see visualization produced by a node. So let's just right-click on it and go to in the middle of this context menu to interactive view, grouped by chart. Let's click on it. And then a browser window will appear with this wonderful pie chart. In this case, we see that only 11% of people, of female people, gain more than $50,000. Let's now close this. Okay. We can get rid of this node that I put here in the beginning by right-click and then delete. Yes. And so basically, this is it. So to create a workflow, you only have to do this process iteratively. You have to look for a node, either in the node repository, from the workflow coach, or from the Nime Hub. Then drag and drop the node, connect it, configure it, and then execute it. When a node is executed, then you can always inspect the output by right-click and then go to the last entry. That's it. Now I have to also do the boring part, which is the documentation. So it's really, really important to document your workflow, because if you open this workflow in 1 week, then you probably won't remember which CSV you're reading here, which rows you're filtering here, and so on. It's really hard to remember what's going on. So it's important to always comment under your nodes. And to modify this comment here, you just have to double click on it and then write something meaningful. Like in this case, we filter out males. So let's say filter, we filter females. Filter female. Okay. Another tool also important for documentation is the workflow annotations, which are colorful rectangles that you can put inside your workflow, also to write text and to wrap nodes. In this case, to create a workflow annotation, you have to right-click on an empty space and then select New Workflow Annotation. And you can move this rectangle, for example, here. And then we can add some text here by double-clicking on this pencil. And let's write, for example, data pre-processing, something like that. You can even edit it. Let's make it bigger, bold, and in the middle. And now you know what's going on in this part of the workflow. One last thing that you could do to make your workflow, to give more structure to your workflow, is to use Metanodes. So basically, when your workflow become really big with it can become really messy with a lot of connections going around. So you can hide some complexity using a metanode, grouping nodes together. And to add a metanode, you just have to select some nodes, then right-click, and then click on Create Metanode. Now you will be asked to reset your nodes and then put a name for the metanode, like pre-processing again. Now those nodes are hidden inside this metanode. And so the complexity is kind of hidden there. You can always inspect the content of a metanode by double-clicking on it. And then a new tab will appear showing the nodes that are inside that metanode. When you're done inside a metanode, you just have to close this tab and you will be brought back to the main workflow. Okay, so that was the end of my short presentation. I hope you now have a general understanding of the platform, and I also wish you a lot of fun during the Learnathon. And I will give it back to Catherine for the rest of the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Emilio, for this introduction. And I will start sharing my screen. Okay, and I will move on with the introduction to the data science lifecycle. So probably many of you or some of you might recognize this diagram here. And this diagram here is called the CRISP-DM cycle, which stands for Cross-Industry Standard for Data Mining. And it is a standard that describes the different steps which are involved in a data science cycle, or common steps which are involved in the data science cycle. And the part which this diagram describes already nicely is the part where we create a data science application or a data science solution to our problem. And it starts here with the business understanding. That's the part which we have in any project, whether it's a data science project or another project, that we have to understand the requirements of the business, and we need to kind of define the goals of our project. Then we have the next step, which is the data understanding step, where we collect data from different data sources, which might be helpful to answer the question that we defined during the business understanding phase. Once we have the data sets that we want to use, then we can move on to the data preparation phase, where we might want to combine these different data sources into one table by either writing the different tables below each other, if these are customer data with the same columns from different systems, or next to each other if we want to perform a join. And then we want to prepare our data so that we can then use our data set to train, for example, a predictive model in the modeling phase. Here we then we train different models, and we tweak our models to find the best performing model. Then we evaluate our model, and then we also check whether the model that we trained actually meets the goals that we defined during the business understanding. Where this diagram falls short, though, is during the deployment part, because here it just says, check whether your model meets your business requirements or meets the goal that you defined, and then you need to deploy it. And the circle around the whole diagram tells us kind of that this is not a one-time thing, but we need to do it more often. But we at Nime, we thought, okay, the deployment is not that detailed, or is not described that detailed in this CRISP-DM cycle. And therefore, we used the CRISP-DM cycle as kind of a starting point to define a new standard where we add a second circle, which describes the different steps which are involved in the productionizing phase. This means here on the left-hand side in the creation circle of this infinity loop, we kind of have all the steps that we have already in the CRISP-DM cycle, but then we have a second circle which describes all the productionizing steps. Because here in the blend and transform step, again, we connect to different data sources and we combine the data sources together. Then we have next the model and visualization step, where we select different models, or we try different models to create insight or to get insight out of our data. And maybe there it's also helpful to use some visualizations. Then we have here the second part of this modeling phase, kind of from the CRISP-DM cycle, where we optimize our model. And here we have now something new, because what you can do with Nime Analytics Platform is you can already capture parts of your creation part. This means part of the data pre-processing and the modeling, and use these parts that you capture here or that you define here in this capturing step in your production phase. And then in the production phase, we actually have the first step where we again validate our model to see what kind of value does our data science application add to our business. And then we can use one of the many options to deploy our model. Once our model is deployed, it is then available in some remote location, and we can actually consume and interact with our model. This could mean via a data science application. This means a person interacts with our data science application, where we allow a user to execute a workflow, for example, via a web browser, and interact with a workflow via a web browser. Another option could be to deploy it as, or to deploy it as a data science service, so that other tools can actually call this workflow or parts of this workflow to use the model that you trained. Or you can use it, or you can create a reusable component in Nime Analytics Platform. Or what you can do as well as a deployment step is that you say, okay, I have a workflow and I now want to execute this workflow every day because it takes some data from a database, makes some predictions, and should write it back so I can see the predictions when I come back to the office in the morning. Another step that is also important in the production phase is the monitor and update part, because after you deployed your model, you actually, or your data science application, you also need to maintain it, because over time you might have some enhancements so that you need to update your data science application, or there are some bugs that come up and you need to fix them. Or you also have to monitor to check whether something unexpected happens, or your model doesn't perform that well anymore because something in the data set has just changed over time. And at Nime, we actually built software that cover this entire data science lifecycle. We have on one hand our open source tool, which Emilio just introduced, which is the Nime Analytics Platform, which allows you to cover all the steps here in this creation loop of our infinity loop. And on the other hand, we have also our commercial product, which is the Nime server, which helps you with all the steps that we have in the loop on the right-hand side in the production loop. This doesn't look like a workflow yet, but actually we can cover all these different steps that we have in this data science lifecycle using the Nime Analytics Platform, because we do have nodes for all the different steps that I just mentioned. For example, for the blending and transformation step, we have first of all the different options to read from different sources. That could be from a database. And here you don't need to write any SQL queries, but you can just use nodes to assemble your SQL queries. Or you can also read data from different cloud sources, like for example, from Amazon S3 or from SharePoint. And from there, you could then read, for example, a CSV file or an Excel file, or as Emilio showed in his presentation, you can also read files that you have locally on your machine. You can also connect to a big data environment, for example, via the Hive connector node, and also access data in a Hadoop environment using Nime Analytics Platform. Once you have read in all the different data sets that you want to use to solve your data science task, then you can use the different transformation nodes to, for example, blend data together by writing it below each other or next to each other, or by calculating different aggregations using the group by node, or normalizing your data before you train your machine learning model. Then we have different nodes for the modeling phase, where we have different learner and different predictor nodes that allow you to train a machine learning model or to train a forecasting model using, in this case, the decision tree algorithm. But we have many different learner nodes because you can not only train one model, but you can train also multiple models, which is then an ensemble of models where you train, for example, many trees. And that's something you could do with the random forest learner node. In addition, we have here also integrations that allow you, for example, to train also deep learning models, where we have the Keras and the TensorFlow integration in case you want to use deep learning in your data science project. And then we have really a lot of different visualization nodes, where we also integrated other libraries, like, for example, Plotly, which allow you to visualize your data to get more insights. And then we have the capturing part in our creation workflow cycle, in the left-hand cycle. Therefore, we have this integrated deployment extension, which comes with this capture workflow start and capture workflow end node, which allows you to capture part of your creation workflow and then later reuse this one in your deployment workflow. And if you want to learn more about this, how to use this capture workflow start and capture workflow end node, then I recommend you to join later group 3 in the hackathon part, because Paolo is going to show you there in detail how this works. And with this, I gave you a quick introduction into the different steps involved in a data science project. And if you get started on your own projects, then I can highly recommend our example server. And the example server is a free server that you can find in a public server that you can find in your Nime Explorer, where you can log in without any credentials. And especially in the folder 50 applications, you can find example or blueprint workflows for many different applications. So you don't need to start from scratch if you want to start solving your own data science use case. In addition, another great resource, which Emilio already mentioned, is also the Nime Hub, which you can either use inside of Nime Analytics Platform or also via the browser by going to hub.nime.com, where you can search for nodes, as Emilio did, but you can also search for workflows. And here, the Nime Hub is a community hub. This means here you can find all the workflows that you can find on the example server, but in addition, also workflows who other Nimers or Nime users did upload to the Nime Hub. And here the Nime community is really active, uploading more and more workflows to the Nime Hub. And actually also if you have a nice workflow, you can upload it to the Nime Hub as well. So others can use your workflows as blueprint as well. And with this, I want to introduce you to our challenge of today. And the challenge that we want to solve today is a so-called classification problem. Therefore, we want to use the airline dataset, which you can download from this link. But we have already downloaded and filtered part of this dataset, which we want to use today. And in the training material or the Learnathon material that we shared with you, you will find this dataset already. And in this dataset, we have only a smaller subset where we have only the data from 2007. And our goal is to train a model to predict whether a flight is going to have a departure delay or not. This means we have a classification problem where we have two classes. We want to train a model that predicts this flight is going to have a departure delay or this flight is not going to have a departure delay. In the original data set, we don't have the information delay or no delay, but we do have the information how long the departure delay was. So an integer value, not a class value yet. Therefore, in group one of the tasks is to actually convert this information, whether how big the delay was, into a class column. And here we say, if the departure delay is smaller than 15 minutes, then this flight doesn't have a delay. But if the departure delay is larger than 15 minutes, then it is actually a delay. And besides this information, whether a flight did have a departure delay or not, other available features in the dataset which we provide is, for example, the date, the departure time, the carrier, the destination, and whether the flight was canceled or not. And we prepared now 3 challenges for today, covering 3 different steps of our data science lifecycle. We have group 1, which is going to work on the data access and data manipulation part with Lada together. Then we have group 2, which is going to work with me together on the machine learning part, where we want to train different models and find the model that performs best. And we also want to learn how we can optimize or tweak our models by trying out different setting options. And if you want to learn more about deployment, then you can join group 3 in a second, where you will learn about different options, how you can deploy your data science application. And for this, we prepared these different workflows and we shared them already with you. And if you downloaded it, then you should have a file in your downloads folder, which is called from raw data to deployment.nar. And the first step that we all need to do now is that we actually need to import these workflows into Nime Analytics Platform. And to do so, what you need to do, you need to right-click on local and then say import Nime workflow. So to import a workflow, go to the Nime Explorer, right-click on local, import Nime workflow, and then you can browse to the file. And for me, it's at a desktop. For you, it's probably in your downloads folder. So you can select this file and then click open and then finish. And then you have here a new folder, what we call a workflow group. And if you click on this triangle here in the front, then you can go under Learnathon, challenges, and find the group which you want to work on. For example, if you want to work on group 1, what you can do in a second is you import the workflows by right-clicking on local and then import Nime workflow. And then once you've imported them, you can navigate to group 1 and then double-click on this workflow. And then you will see this workflow here. And in each of these workflows, we added some descriptions what you need to do. And therefore, we have these different metanodes. And remember, to open a metanode, you can just double-click on data access. And then you find here, you are inside of this metanode, and then you find always a description what you need to do. This means open the workflow and then always go from one metanode to the other to solve the different steps of your group. And I saw already in the chat that someone wants to join multiple groups. You do have the material for all the groups and also the solutions in case you want to check out the other groups later on as well. If you have problems importing the data, the workflows later on, just let us know. We are happy to help you. And now we actually want to switch to Gathertown, which is another tool which allows us to interact a little bit more than in Zoom. And we will share a link with you in a second. And once you're signed in, it will look like this, that we have here our virtual conference hall for today, where you are a little avatar and you can move around and you can decide in which group you want to participate. So I will show you in a second how this works, but then you can just walk into the group which you want to join. We will share a link in a second, and once you click on this link, you will first see this page here, where you can define your name, or where you can type in your name and customize your little avatar, and then click next. Once you click next, then you need to grant access to Gathertown to access your microphone and camera, so you can talk with each other in a second and others can see you as well. And to do so, you can click on this little lock here next to the URL input field. And once you've done this, then you can click on join the gathering, and then you will be first in our lobby. And here you can then move around with the keys on your keyboard or using the keys W, A, S, and D to move around here in our virtual conference hall. If you have any problems using Gathertown, then you can go here to the help desk. One of our Nimers will be there to answer any Gather-related questions, or you can just go back to this Zoom meeting here, and Julia will be here and is happy to help you to get started with Gathertown. A little tip, if there are things in your way and you can't walk through them, then you can press G on your keyboard and move around. And this allows you to also walk through other avatars or other things that might be on your way. Once you are in the room, for example, here we are in group 3 in the deployment room, then you can see here these little carpets and you can just take a seat. And always the people who are on one of these carpets, they can then talk with each other, and you can also help each other in case you run into questions or into any problems. But in addition, if you run into problems or you need help, then of course there are, as I mentioned, there are also many other Nimers around in Gathertown today who are happy to help you. And to get help, you can just raise your hand. And therefore you need to click on this little smiley here on the bottom. And then you can click here on the hand, and then a little hand will appear on top of your head or the head of your avatar. And then one of us Nimers will approach you to help you and to solve your problem. The other option is also you can just press 6 on the keyboard. That will also add this, this hand on top. You can also use the chat to write questions. To use the chat, you need to click here on the speaking bubbles, and then you can write your question here. What would be helpful here is, because we are using the chat for all 3 rooms, if you would put the group number in front of your question so we know for which group the question is. And besides this, of course, you can also ask other people on your carpet. And we used to do this Learnathon in person. And sometimes it was also like this, that one person was building the workflows and the other one was just helping. So that's completely up to you and the people which are around you. What we will do as well, and at the same time, is there's also a Nimer in each of the rooms who will always show the solution step by step. So we will show you the first few steps and then you can follow along, but you can also mute us in case you want to try it out on yourself. Two last tips before we move to GatherTown. One of the things with GatherTown is that if you switch to Nime Analytics Platform, then you are automatically muted and your video is switched off. If you want to work within Nime Analytics Platform and talk with the people around you at the same time, then you need to go to the settings by clicking here on the settings button and then uncheck this checkbox auto idle muting. And in general, you can also mute yourself and unmute yourself by clicking here on the microphone on the lower right, because on the lower right, you can always see yourself. And on the top, you can see all the people who are close to you. And there you have also the option to unmute and to mute them. But here, this muting means that you only mute them for yourself. So if there is someone close by and you think, okay, I don't want to listen to this specific person at the moment, then you can mute this person, but then this person is only muted for you and not for everyone. If you ask questions or you raise your hand and you have a question and we think this question might be useful for everyone, then we might ask you if it's okay to put you on spotlight. This would mean that then everyone in this room can hear you and you can ask your question, and then maybe the teacher in the room can answer the question for everyone. And with this, I'm now looking forward to meet you all in GatherTown. And one of my colleagues should have posted this link now into the chat. And I recommend to use Chrome for GatherTown. That's what I use and where it works perfectly fine. So you don't need to download the GatherTown app, but you can just click on the link that Roberto shared via the chat and then configure your little avatar and then walk to the room where you want to work on. And then we will meet you there in a second.